ultimately, it's up to you.
Hello, friends. Welcome to the End Evil podcast. This is Kris Nelson, and evil is the destruction of freedom. I'm here today with some friends. I already have my man James Cordner and Will Keller with me here, and we're kind of going back on a conversation from last week where I got together with the One Great Work Warriors, and we were discussing a topic called the conspiracy of denial. And I just showed you a little promo video I put together for the Seed Conference coming up September 24th and 25th. And for that conference, I'm going to do a presentation called A Trap Within a Trap. And what I'm going to talk about in that presentation is the many walls of distraction and walls of perception that obscure our ability to see the truth and to feel the world for what it really is, which is a place where we have the right to be without anybody telling us or coercing us to do things as they wish or as they please. And that right is inherent, and that is the natural law, universal law, karmic law, truth that we are all born into in this life, and inside of our own skin is our choice what we want to do with that. And thanks so much for joining me, James and Will. How you guys doing?
Excellent. Thanks for having us on, brother. Appreciate it.
Good news. We're going to open up this chat to some other folks if they want to join us. I'm going to put that link right now in the live chat. So if you're in YouTube or Facebook, you should be able to see that, and we can get some other folks joining us. And I'd like to say, for folks that want to join in this conversation tonight, please show up with your video screen on, and kind of test your mic ahead of time and wear headphones so we don't get an echo. If I bring someone in and it has a lot of echo, I'm just going to turn them back off. No offense, just want to kind of keep the show professional for folks that are listening and watching. And also a quick reminder, I always forget to do this, but this show just runs completely on me busting my ass all day, working. And every once in a while, it's really nice if somebody contributes to the show. And you can contribute by sharing it, by subscribing on the different channels on YouTube, or adding me as a friend on Facebook and such, and telling other people about this show that's just us putting in our free time and energy to try to help end evil and help people wake up to the reality of natural law. And so, I also really appreciate if somebody would go to my website, endevil.life, and there's a donations page there, and you can, just kick me down a little bit, show some love, and that money will go towards all the costs that associate with running a podcast, which is pretty expensive. It adds up in a lot of little ways. Keep going with this technology, and also I appreciate any support, and that's something that I've made a goal to get a little bit better about asking for what I need, because I could definitely need some help. It's hard running a podcast, but I really appreciate having friends like James and Will. Will helps me produce the show somewhat with connecting me up with the One Great Work Network, and you can see us there. And James has been enthusiastically offering me ideas and help figuring out some of the technology stuff, and I appreciate that as well. So looks like we got some more friends showing up here. I'm going to bring them on in, but why don't you take it away, Will? We're talking about the conspiracy of denial. I'm curious to see what your thoughts might be on that.
Interesting. I like the title. I'm not sure if I'm the best one to start off. I didn't catch a lot of the last conversation.
Let me give you a quick heads up.
Context.
Okay, a lot of times when I'm talking to people out in public or people I work with, welcome Leslie and Kris, by the way. Good to meet you, Kris. Yeah, what people, I'll tell them, be talking about the various subjects we deal with, anything conspiratorial, and folks want to kind of like change the subject when it starts getting a little too deep. Like, it can't all be connected. There's no one, there's no one running all this. All these people can't be working in concert. Basically the idea that it's bigger than just one generational, that this is a generational problem, and there is huge conspiracies. We're swimming in conspiracies, whether it's 9/11, geoengineering, rigged elections, all of politics. But a lot of folks want to stop short and then say, "Oh, it's just one thing, or it's just this, or it's just that," and it really comes down to denial. And so we talked a lot about denial. We broke down what the word denial means, and we talked a lot about the psychological reason people deny truth or don't want to look deeper and get stuck just on the facade, on the material problems right in front of us, rather than looking at this big picture that it's been slavery of humans for a very long time through all these various means and modes, such as government, such as religion, such as education, etc.
Excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's prevalent. Denial. I mean, there's so much evidence and so many events that happen on a continuous basis, right? I mean, look no further than the last few weeks. And when you try to bring these topics up to people and they get triggered or they stick their head in the sand, I think ultimately people are so ensconced in their own 5 sense illusion of their own world and their persona, the persons, the masks that they're wearing, that they don't have a philosophical mindset. They're not activating logic and reason. They're not truly open-minded, right? So when you start talking about these topics that take them out of their comfort zone, then they start squirming, they get uncomfortable, and they're not used to it, which shows you how far humanity has kind of devolved, where even just general philosophical talk, brainstorming, and thinking outside the box on whatever topic, people get quote unquote offended and they get triggered and they react instead of respond. And it's a big problem. I mean, this shows you the lack of internal work and how calcified people are. And that's just the fact of the matter. And if someone's going to stay in that mindset, by nature, by law, then humanity in the aggregate is going to continue to suffer. And the individual people as well are going to continue to see the same patterns within their life and within lifetimes. That's karma. That's the way it works.
Absolutely. Welcome, Fred, and let folks know if somebody jumps in the chat. Sometimes I don't see the way Restream works. It's a little hard to see when a new person pops in. So sometimes it takes a minute, or let me know in the chat if I don't see you. But yeah,
what's up, y'all?
Glad to have you. Welcome, guys. Kris, good to have you here. I haven't got to see you in person yet. Really glad to. Well, it's not in person, but on video. Glad to have you here.
Well, thanks for opening up the invites to a lot more people. You did that 2 weeks ago as well, so that's it's a good way to have more people joining in the discussion. Glad to be here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the more well-rounded, closer to the truth we can get, the more perspectives we put on it, and the more minds we have working on it. So I love having the variety, and I learn from everybody's point of view, and that's what I'm trying to do, and tell other people that we need to be doing. Um, Kris put in our little private chat here. He put together a really cool post on Facebook, and if you're not friends with Kris Nelson on Facebook, I recommend checking him out. I'll put the spelling of his name here on the in the chat, and he put a really. I'm going to try to bring it up on the screen, but let's pass it to James. Did you want to say anything about the conspiracy of denial?
Oh man, there's so many things that come to mind right away. I mean, who are the ones performing this? Like, who are the ones that are inspiring people to be in a state of denial, right? I immediately think of the media. They're the ones performing the conspiracy. They're the ones working together. Conspiracy, as many of us know, just means together in breath, to breathe together. It could also be defined as two or more people working together to the same end, to meet a similar goal. And the state of denial that most people are in, I mean, where does that come from? Why? And I saw Sarah in the chat saying that denial is a fear-based response. It is. It's a fear of the truth. Where, I mean, I know that's something that was already brought up in just the short minutes that we've been on, but yeah, I mean, that's the really long and short of it. I mean, having so many people just like, it almost seems like it's this idea of solipsism comes to mind too, where everyone's just kind of working together to create this false reality that they can all hide away in and just remain there instead of being truthful and honest, being set free with that truth. So that's where I'm at right now. I like Will bringing up the 5 sense illusion too. That it really is like an ego-based mindset, and that is also somebody who's like trapped in fear as well, because it's just, I mean, to play into the title of the show tonight, it's just a denial of what's the truth, the truth of the world, and not a whole lot will take on the task or the burden of trying to lift the veil for people. It's quite frustrating.
Yeah, I'll say.
You know?
And Leslie, thanks so much for joining us. You know how much I always love to see you. And yeah, you were the next one to pop in, so why don't you go ahead, Leslie?
Sure. Yeah, I have some bullet points, some thoughts to share about about denial and denial as a behavior or a psychological habit that is often unconscious. And so a lot of the people that, you're describing, you're talking about, and they don't really think it's possible, it can't be true. I think a lot of their denial is actually operating somewhat instinctual or habitual or defensive, not always psychological, not well thought through. But on the other hand, there is a conspiracy to deny the truth and deny responsibility, to deny taking personal responsibility, right? So we're all dealing with entities who are doing things and then completely denying they're doing them, doing things and then denying the consequences of them, right? And then the public is like getting this dissonance, this contradiction, right? So I think denial as a conspiracy is also intentionally done to confuse us, as a mind control tactic, as a way to create confusion and obfuscation. It becomes like a red herring, things that are meant to be misleading, right? So we're interacting with others with our own denial, our own fear of facing the truth, because the consequences of that are immense, and having issues with knowing who to trust. People don't know who to trust. And the entities that have established themselves to be like our protectors are the ones actually playing with our heads and denying reality. So I think it's a complex web, I guess is partly what I'm saying. And I think we need to ask ourselves, like, what are the skills that people need to identify bullshit, right? And how to counteract the denial of reality that we're hitting our heads against all the time in our media, with our politicians and so forth. How do we catch the inversions, and how do we wield our power to defend ourselves? And then what are the risks? And I think that when we're talking about trying to change, help people to see the truth of things and to set aside their resistance, that we have to acknowledge that that's risky to do. And how do we help people protect themselves from that risk? So those are just some of my thoughts.
Yeah, that's the big deal, the fear, and then the risk. What will happen? James, were you able to get that image pulled up that Kris put together?
Yeah, I have it. I just need to be able to share the screen. There, I think I got it right here. All right, here we go. Can you see that, or do you need to integrate it into the stream? On the sidebar there. Sorry for derailing it, but
no, that's cool. I want to
I like
figure it
that
out.
Leslie
There it is. Yeah.
I like that Leslie brought up the lack of
Yeah.
critical thinking
Yeah,
too.
that's awesome.
Like that's a major factor here. This lack of critical thinking. So, but
the refusal of truth.
Yeah. So here it is. Maybe Kris Nelson should walk us through it. And
Absolutely.
See,
Let's put you on the scene here, Kris. I'll change the screen so we can hear you talk about this.
All right. Well, it was more of a, I guess it was more of a collaborative effort of everyone on the stream that was there 2 weeks ago. I just went through it and took like the main topics, the main ideas that everyone brought up, and I tried to link them together. That like one thing leads to another. So we start off with conspiracy of denial, or the denial of conspiracy. Kris had mentioned that it goes both ways. So we breathe in a conspiracy. Usually it has negative connotations. So we breathe together, but it can also be positive, where we breathe together. So it doesn't have to be negative, but usually in a conspiracy, it's always the negative connotation. So if you match that with denial, that's where in the middle we got, we're denying together. We're doing something together where we're denying it. So that's as we're all, most of us are talking about, it's pretty much the state of our current human created world that we live in for the majority of people, where everyone's denying things together. They all agree on that false reality, that they deny aspects of reality together, and then when those of us who do see things, we talk about conspiracies, just things that are happening in reality, that some of them are people breathing together doing things for nefarious purposes, and some of them are just things that are happening, and we get shot down as just being conspiracy theorists. So they deny actual conspiracies, and then they deny reality, and that's part of I guess, the conspiracy of denial and denial of conspiracy part, and then everything else that everyone talked about from there. So the denial leading to attachment. I obviously forgot the fear, which was a good point that Sarah brought up in the chat. That's one of the main source points, and yeah, everything spreads out as a web based on what everyone talked about, and I try to connect everything that was going along. And I think Kris last week brought up the points of theory related to conspiracy, and the theory, and how that's a mystery, and science is testing reality. So we're trying to solve the mystery, that we come up with theories. And then the other aspect is the ones that people deny. The geoengineering and 9/11 were two examples that Kris had brought up. And one of the big parts is the trauma and the abuse related to the government, the belief in authority, and the control and the enslavement that brings, and the collectivism and the cult mentality and the groupthink. And that all leads to a lack of care for truth. And also on the other side, back to the top right with attachment, that also leads to a lack of care for truth, where people are attached to things that are wrong. And So they don't want to actually look into other aspects, which I guess they would term as conspiracies. So they deny things that are happening because they're attached to the false way, and they're not learning about the alternative or other ways that people are living or better ways that they can live. So they have a lack of care for truth that would drive them to that. And part of attachment is the identity. We identify with ourselves and our jobs, as someone else had brought up. And I added, I think that was me, that we can't admit wrong. And so we can't imagine better. So that all ties into that. And I think I added, I mentioned in the chat when it was happening, the pleasure trap. And other people added that we're attached to the comfort. So that's part of the addiction. When we have addictions, well, the pleasure trap and the comfort that comes along with it. And that leads us to a helplessness. And the addiction is gives us like a sense of security. And that's also tied to government and the sense of security that it provides. And all of this leads, I guess, in the center to don't think. When you have the conspiracy of denial, the denial of conspiracy leads us to not thinking and being obedient to, such as government. And at the top was the information overload and the cognitive dissonance. That's part of why people just deny things, and they don't want to look at it and ignore it because it's just everything that's out there that they're not aware of and other people talk about. Well, it's just so much information, so they prefer to just not look at it at all. And I guess I'll end it there.
Wow, that's brilliant breakdown. It's like a whole presentation. Thanks so much for putting that together, Kris. That's fantastic, and it can be so overwhelming. All these things we're talking about. I think, look how much time we can spend thinking and talking about these things, and there's still more we're discovering, the connections, how it all fits together, and why. It, like, I can remember first coming to these conclusions. Like, for instance, after my research on geoengineering and weather modification, like, how can people not realize this? Like, how can it be that I'm realizing this? I know a lot of the people that I thought were smarter than me. Why haven't they? And it takes some time to break it down in your mind and understand where people are at, because part of what makes it seem impossible is like, how could more people not get it? Therefore, it must not be the case. But I talked a lot, so I'm glad to see Fred here. Welcome, Sarah, too. Good to see you here. But why don't you go ahead, Fred? I'd like to hear your ideas on this topic. Thanks for joining us.
First, thank you for having me tonight. I appreciate it. Denial is a big thing because the phenomena is not only in the culture; it's actually into the mindset of people and how they were grown into and where they were grown into. So if you have the influence of your parents, who probably most of us here have status parents, so there's a denial about freedom, and there's a denial about emotional stability and intellectual maturity. So we have a big problem in the sense that I agree with, I don't know who mentioned it, but our ability to respond to stimuli is a big part of it. And when you don't have that, when you don't have this rhetoric inside of you, trivium manners of filtering all this information and this relationship that you have with yourself. And one of the big problem is the denial of your own true nature, is the denial of facing the fact about what you've done, what you are, what you think, and what you're doing with your time. Some people will still live into shame, but it's like it's meaningless at this point. We are over this state. We are way over the state of shame. We are way over. It's not even about tolerance anymore. It's about who's have the bigger guns, who has the better ideology. So we have to get back inside. this is where the work starts. And I keep coming back with shadow work because shadow work is it's a counter denial. When you start the shadow work, this denial is going away. It doesn't mean that you're not gonna get through some crisis of your own when you talk about denial. I mean, we are here to discover these these facts, these events that we have in our life, and everything is connected together. And I want to bring back the correspondence principle. If you're in denial about your own responsibility and your emotional responsibility and your spiritual responsibility, how do you deal with that in the macro? It's in it's in heavy weight on the shoulders of the people. Not just going, just like stopping and say, okay, I believed in lies, I swallowed it. Just this fact is, it's fighting. You're fighting against this this program, this indoctrination. Every time we have to go back and dig and get out, we will encounter cognitive dissonance, and then you're gonna start to confront all these shadow parts of yourself, and there are denials because you refuse to look into these things. You refuse because we are lazy, because we're immature, because we're childlike, and this is not the way we have to go. We have to counter all this program, this culture that we have. It's individual treatment, individual healing that we have to do first. And denial is the one thing. And then I like what Sarah mentioned, that denial is fear-based response. Absolutely. It's the fear of responsibility. So I
Absolutely.
mean, yeah.
And I don't know if someone said this last week, but what you made me think of, Fred, is like denial of denial. It's like that
Yeah.
part inside of the self saying, "I'm not denying anything. No, I'm not." It's like, yeah, that's exactly what you're doing. But yeah, I mean, it's like that. It is hard, and that I know it because when a lot of things I can think back when I came to some of these big realizations, it was a real struggle because like you're saying, there is this sort of guilt you have to come to terms with. That means now I have to do something about it. That means I was dumb before. I mean, I wasn't making good decisions. Why didn't I realize this kind of thing? And eventually we have to let go of all that, but there's just a little while where you have to just face it. And that's the part I think that some people aren't ready for, or it's just too big of a monster to face. I don't know. What do you think, Sarah?
Mm, well, in the case of just people having, like, expressing denial, a lot of times I don't even think that people know why they're denying it. It's like entirely subconscious, maybe. It's just just social conditioning, social engineering, like things that we have in, like, even public schools. If you think of stuff like debate class or anything like that, where it pits people against each other. And I mean, I'm not going to say all debate classes are like bad, like some of them are actually like constructed really well, but a lot of them are not. And it's just like kids arguing against each other. So it's already just training them to just do that at each other all the time, no matter what they hear. Yeah. And it doesn't really matter what they're hearing or why they're hearing. And they don't put any thought into why they don't agree or why they're denying it. But then I think some people are just, they get stuck into a pattern, and then they'll deny something because in their own minds they'll go, well,
I wouldn't do that. So automatically for them, it is impossible for them to accept that other people might do that. So that's how I usually end up, like, those are the kind of people I usually kind of meet when then I end up in a conversation where they're just denying something is obviously based in reality, and they're just like, nah, nah, they don't want to hear it, and they're not going to hear it. And well, like I was saying, it's denial's a fear-based response, and I don't even think that they know what they're afraid of. They just don't want to look at it. They don't want to see it at all, because then they have to change everything about well, at least they feel there, it's like this, all this stress inside them that makes them feel that they have to change everything about them, that they just have to, like, that they're just like the worst person in the whole world. It just goes all the way automatically over to that, like that everything is bad, everything that they've ever said or done or thought or felt or whatever is wrong, and then they're a bad person somehow for it. And instead of just taking in bits of pieces of information, and instead of going to the right or wrong category, which is what a lot of people want to do, it's either right or it's wrong because of based on whatever my perception or my opinion or whatever it is. It's they all do, a lot of people just do that instead of people developing a consideration file in their head. How many
Like, let
people
it
do you
brew.
know?
You don't have to make a decision right now, right?
Yeah, nobody says when you hear a piece of information that you have to go, oh, okay, I believe that, or no, I don't believe that. You're not really supposed to do either of those things. You're supposed to take in that information and put it into your consideration file for further investigation.
Absolutely. And that makes me think, Sarah. I was really impressed with Mark Passio's and his presentations when he talks about the left and right brain, and the common issues that people have in their brain thinking is jumping from one to the other at the opposite time, almost from when we want to. So if you're taking in new information, that's the time to kind of be more logical in many cases. And well, let me think about that. Let me give it that logic, and then. But people will go right into react mode. And a lot of times that's just putting up a wall, like you're saying, without even realizing it, either changing the subject or starting to say accusatory things to try to trap the person they're talking to, not even realizing they're doing all that. But really, there's this edging right away to kind of get away from this topic, get away from the subject, because somehow intuitively, emotionally, they know that, oh, I don't want to go near it. Almost like how you don't want to go too close to the fire because you can feel the heat. But looks like we got one great work warrior, Jerry, here. What's up, Jerry? Good to see you, brother.
Good to see you too, guys. Apologies if a lag comes in. It's just happened as soon as I
Sound good.
joined. Thanks. Just wanted to say I love what Fred said. It's about the shadow work. And I was also thinking about what Jim said. The addiction is huge. So, and like I can extend on like how I've been denying, like how I've been in denial, let's say, like with fasting. I realize like, hey, I might have an addiction with food. And it's like, if I'm not dealing with these issues, like how, like Fred said, the law of correspondence. So there's like a lot of things I'm still like dealing with, but like the first thing is to accept it and then, yeah, just correct it. So I'll just leave it there.
Yeah, that's, we can all see it in ourselves if we look, but sometimes I think it's hard to look. And I want to share this again because I just read it, but John in Facebook chat said, transformation and truth discovery is a filtering process. It takes effort and work. It's easier to zone out and let others make your choices. Look, just recently with the vaccines. I don't know, I've met recently a few people who have told me, I wish I wouldn't have made the choice I made regarding that jab. And a lot of people were not necessarily coerced, but there was a lot of pressure on them, maybe to keep a particular job or show up at some place they wanted to go, or even family members told them, well, if you want to come to my house or if you want to play with the children, you better go do that. And look how many people made that choice and have regretted it, you know? And I think there's a lot out there from what I'm seeing, but that's, that's my perception. Um, I'm, I, I guess everybody's going to have to perceive on their own, and we'll see over time. And that's the real truth of it. But, James, you said you had something you could read for us.
Yes. After what Fred said about people being childish, and then Sarah following up with giving an example of public schools, and even with some of the other things that have been said since, I would like to read just a portion of chapter 1 of John Taylor Gatto's Dumbing Us Down, the Hidden Curriculum of Public Schools in America, if I may.
Do you have that text too, so we can put it on screen, or no?
I do. I can.
Yeah, let's
I
put it
can
up so
share
people can look at it while you're reading that, and I'll see if I can get the right window up.
Here you go. And I'll begin. I'm just going to read number 5 because it's pertinent to the conversation this evening. Number 5, and this actually. Let me go back to the top here, and to the beginning. It's chapter 1 is called the 7-lesson school teacher, and this will be an excerpt from the speech that was given when he was being named. John Taylor Gatto was being named New York State Teacher of the Year for 1991. And so there's chapter 1 here is the 7-lesson school teacher, and number 5. So basically what this is that this is the real 7 lessons that he realized he was teaching children, and that he thinks that a lot of teachers are teaching children. And number 5 goes a little something like this. The 5th lesson I teach is intellectual dependency. Good students wait for a teacher to tell them what to do. This is the most important lesson of them all. We must wait for other people, better trained than ourselves, to make the meanings of our lives. The expert makes all the important choices. Only I, the teacher, can determine what my kids must study, or rather, only the people who pay me can make those decisions, which I then enforce. If I'm told that evolution is a fact instead of a theory, I transmit that as ordered, punishing deviants who resist what I have been told to tell them to think. This power to control what children will think lets me separate successful students from failures very easily. Successful children do the thinking I assign them with a minimum of resistance and a decent show of enthusiasm. Of the millions of things of value to study, I decide what few we have time for. Actually, though, this is decided by my faceless employers. The choices are theirs. Why should I argue? Curiosity has no important place in my work, only conformity. Bad kids fight this, of course, even though they lack the concepts to know what they are fighting, struggling to make decisions for themselves about what they will learn and when they will learn it. How can we allow that and survive as school teachers? Fortunately, there are tested procedures to break the will of those who resist. It is more difficult, naturally, if the kids have respectable parents who have come to their aid. But that happens less and less in spite of the bad reputation of schools. No middle-class parents I have ever met actually believe that their kids' school is one of the bad ones. Not one single parent in many years of teaching. That's amazing, and probably the best testimony to what happens to families when mother and father have been well-schooled themselves, learning the 7 lessons. Good people wait for an expert to tell them what to do. It is hardly an exaggeration to say that our entire economy depends upon this lesson being learned. Think of what might fall apart if children weren't trained to be dependent. The social services could hardly survive. They would vanish, I think, into the recent historical limbo out of which they arose. Counselors and therapists would look on in horror as the supply of psychic invalids vanished. Commercial and entertainment of all sorts, including television, would wither as people learned again how to make their own fun. restaurants, the prepared food industry, and a whole host of other assorted food services would be drastically downsized if people returned to making their own meals rather than depending on strangers to plant, pick, chop, and cook for them. Much of modern law, medicine, and engineering would go too, as well as the clothing business and school teaching, unless a guaranteed supply of helpless people continued to pour out of our schools each year. Don't be too quick to vote for radical school reform if you want to continue getting a paycheck. We've built a way of life that depends on people doing what they are told because they don't know how to tell themselves what to do. It's one of the biggest lessons I teach. And that, everyone, is some serious shit.
That is real. You know, I had nightmares after high school about having to go to high school, and I still think back about school, and I didn't realize at the time why so many of those things were so damaging to me. But I knew as I was going through it that my spirit was resistant to the way that I was being dealt with in the schooling system, and I think it's a crime. And that being said, I've met amazing teachers, and I have many friends and people I know who are wonderful teachers who care much about children. And I think if more people cared about children the way so many teachers do, individual teachers, we would have a better world. And I don't want to put those teachers down, but a lot of them also still are living in this denial to looking at the bigger picture and the bigger problems that, like John Taylor Gatto is talking about, which are very real and very much part of a conspiracy, actually, because our schooling system was brought here from another place where they created the Nazis, you know, and it was the same kind of system that was used, that was reinvented here, and then, you know, forcing our children to all come together away from their parents and splitting up communities and fragmenting our minds and our children. But, you know,
It
there's a
just
lot
kind
to
of
be said
shows
there.
like, where does this need of denial come from? Where's the source, right? If we want to, like, what's the cause? We want to
I
bring
can
it to a
answer that.
causal level. Yeah, go ahead.
Why don't you
Sorry.
jump in, Will?
My Seed 5 presentation, I'm going to dive into this, and the title of my presentation is Rites of Passage. This is where, if we reduce it down, the majority of humanity are children. They have not spiritually, physically, mentally, emotionally transitioned into adulthood. This is what rites of passage is. It's giving one the tools to equip themselves to let their childhood die and they transition and step up into adulthood. And in every human culture all throughout history, there's always been rites of passage, ceremonies and rituals at a certain age, right? 13, 15, even up to 18, around this time period. This is, you know, when puberty and you're leaving your adolescence, you're separating, if you're a man or you're a boy, going into manhood, you're separating from the womb energetically, metaphysically, emotionally from your mom. We all come from women, right? So for men, this is big. Rites of passage, it's heavily on men because women naturally, physically go through a rites of passage. First blood, the first menstrual cycle, nature saying, boom, here it is. There's no denying it, right? It's right there. But men, on the other hand, men have to go through a process willingly. And this is when they become men. And this lack of transitioning has left the majority of men mainly weak and women weak as well, just from lack of knowledge. And so this is what the root cause is that the majority of human beings are still spiritual children, mentally, emotionally, and physically, I would say. So this is what it comes down to. And when you think of denial, right, denial is an action. You're denying truth. And a common phrase that a kid says, right? Or we even hear it now. I don't believe in that. I don't believe in that. I choose not to believe in that. That's an action. That is denial. Doesn't matter how much evidence It can be right in front of you. You can observe reality. It doesn't matter. Someone saying, I don't believe in that. That's a child right there, for sure. So this is
Like
kind
the
of what
solipsistic, right? The thing we all go through as child, like maybe I'm the only one that's real and everything else is just I could just make up whatever I want, right?
correct. Because a big component to rites of passage is separation, right? It's separation to die onto yourself and recognize your responsibility and your accountability in the world, and recognizing that there is a bigger force out there and you are part of something bigger. So you have a responsibility for yourself that then trickles into the whole, right? So and so where's the root? Where's the causal factor, right? And it always comes back to parents, conscious parenting. This is where all the conditioning and the programming go. But that's the childhood. Adults still responsible for their own actions and transmuting and transforming the trauma that they've experienced. And this is what we need to do. You know, a man goes through 3 potential opportunities for a rites of passage in his lifetime. The first one is the most important. If you miss that first one, you want to know what the brain does? It immediately, this is for a man, it immediately wants to identify with a loud groupthink, right? So without spilling my whole presentation, I'll end my rant on that. But this is where I see the root as far as this topic.
Yeah, and I think the thing I like to bring up on that is because my mind is very much on community and how people work together and how they don't. Because I've had some unique experiences in my life with that. And one big realization for me is that our whole society structure is trying to do this like nuclear family thing where it's just a mom and dad, which in many cases is just one or the other who are split up, a bunch of legal problems. But the bigger problem there is there's not a community. It takes a whole tribe to raise one child. We need the whole family and we need a lot more people. And so even like obviously the parents are super important, but it's more than just 2 people or one person. It's all the adults interacting with the children, the grandparents, the uncles, the cousins, the brothers, the other people in the community that work together. And I think the fact that we've allowed ourselves to be so fractionalized in that way makes that aspect even worse. But
But wait. I'm sorry to cut in.
Go ahead,
What do you
James.
do? What would you give for advice to somebody whose entire family is the people that are in denial and have separated entirely from that person because of how severe that state of denial is?
Yeah, it's not a simple solution. It's just right now we're kind of at recognizing the problem stage, right?
Right.
I would suggest that it's going to take some time to rebuild the type of community aspect that we want to build, right? So
Mhm.
first, what we're trying to do is the rhetoric of helping people understand natural law and truth and freedom. If we can get that out there, then we have a chance to build community around that. But there's no simple advice to someone in this shitty situation we're in where we're all split up and cut down. You got to do the best you have with what you with what you got. But we didn't used to have this community of the people that are here, and we do now, and other people can interact with us. And so we can start to form our own communities and larger families of people that watch out and care for what's going into the minds of children. And I think that is more than just the parent of the child's job to help create that content out into the world. Indica Martin's a good example, someone who put a book out there for children. I've done a couple of recordings of books that I think are good for kids and put them on YouTube. If more people were creating, everybody's putting their kids on these devices, we need to be giving them better stuff to watch and learn, So, that's just a quick answer, but
I don't think there's an easy answer for
You're
that.
right.
I mean, I have the blessing of having 3 wonderful children, and I took the responsibility of educating them myself. And this is one of the things that keep us from growing up is the denial of a responsibility of the education of the young. Sure, everybody is responsible for the children, but essentially, people who have children, most people, I would say, and they're sending their children to schools, they're denying them freedom. They're denying them the power to choose. And it is an horrifying thought to me. I had children, and I wanted since the beginning. I don't want the fucking state to educate my children. I don't want to let them go there. I know it's hell. I know it's a prison for them. So I'm not denying the world, the situation, and I'm not denying my children to have a critical thought. I'm not denying them of being free of choosing their own things. We are here to guide them. They're not propriety. They're not property. They're humans. They're different than us, and sure, they come from us. We made them, but essentially they're individual with individual needs, with individual fundamental demands, and denying them this and sending them into repetitive propagandist states of minds and schools. They are destroying the mind of the children, and people are in denial of that. And what result we have now? Children are in revolt. Children are scared. They're angry. They're revolting themselves, and you see it. It's a immune response to evil. It's just that we cannot let this happen. It's that way. I did my French podcast about this. I told people, you don't love your children. You're enduring them. You're permitting them to be with you, but you don't love them. Here in Quebec, we have a big problem with that. People don't like their children, and it's sad. It's depressing, and I try to make them realize, and to the people who send them there, it's your responsibility. It is your responsibility to be a moral, spiritual being, and not only in words, but you have to learn them by example. It's simple as that. It's not simple to do, but the solution is simple.
Yeah, our society makes it as tricky as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And, because of the other things you mentioned, people not taking responsibility, and then society as a whole kind of turning a blind eye to some really serious problems that those of us that are here are not just going to keep letting go by. We're going to start talking about them, because if we don't, who will? Who wants to jump in next on that topic before I bring up something else?
Hey, Kris, if I can actually say something about it takes a village to raise a child, I actually disagree with this, and I'll tell you for a couple reasons. That quote is supposed to be an African proverb, but it has an unknown source, and it actually got well known during the 90s from the New Age movement. Now, as we know, individuals make up a community. A child is born unto two individuals, a mother and a father. That is the foundation. That is the rock. What that quote is trying to mean, it's saying that if a community has moral values and provides safety, meaning the community, the village is the atmosphere, then a child will be raised correctly or advance or better. But I see that almost as a secondary stage. First and foremost, mother and father have the responsibility and the duty to raise that child. And in the world that we're currently living in, it's even more of a responsibility to really understand where your child is and the influences that are around your young children. Talking about young children versus, teenaged or older kids. So, yeah, it's a good quote, but context is really important. And it takes a healthy, educated, moral, and active mother and father.
And I
Yeah.
know, Will, you are a single, parent, and you juggle a lot of things and work. I think my feeling about that partly comes from being a father of two and both of us parents working, just trying to make it and just getting stretched so thin that it was so hard to maintain just even a good attitude sometimes. And like
Sure.
Fred's saying, I can think of times where I wasn't really truly loving my kids the way I felt I would or should. But I know you got something to say, Leslie. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, I know, you can tell. I I think that this concept was inverted. I know Hillary Clinton wrote a book about it, and I think that was part of the inversion of this idea to basically push kids into preschools, Head Start programs, and daycares, and to help move kids away from the parental unit and take the control of the influence on children's minds away from the parents. So I'm in agreement of the foundational importance of the parents being very protective around the people in the village that they kind of, especially younger kids, right? And because that the kids are exposed to, and really taking that time to teach kids about critical thinking skills and natural law and discernment and psychological awareness. So, because that's lacking. Social emotional skills are being taken out of preschools and kindergartens. The focus on academic learning and having kids write with hands that aren't even developed to be able to do it is pushing this agenda. And preschool teachers I know are trying to push back and say, wait a minute, whoa, that's like not even developmentally appropriate. So parents need to educate themselves about the development of children, our individual development, including their own and their psychological mechanics, because this is where I'm, what Fred is saying about the shadow work. It's so important because it's not taught, it's not emphasized. So people are walking around not knowing themselves, not having a habit of self-reflection, not understanding about how defenses operate and are created through our experiences. People don't know how to deal with emotions in so many ways. So then the physiology takes over, and then things get buried underneath, and people don't even understand their own dynamics. So if parents aren't understanding that, and they're letting their kids just go out willy-nilly and get randomly chaotic messages, the whole there's no structure. It's like there's no direction. It's all seen as chaotic or random, but it's not.
It's making me think of
Yeah.
the concept of mirrored neurons
Yes.
a lot, actually. Everything that you just said. I mean, we are like our children are just like biologically primed to learn what they need to learn, how to use their biological vessel by mimicking us, their parents, because they, I mean, that's how biology works. They're our kids, right? So, I mean, when they're like 8, how long? 5 to 10 hours a day for, the first, however, well, starting at 3, they want kids to go into these public institutions at 3, what's the latest, like 5, 6, maybe 6, and then what, 5 to 10 hours a day from there on a total of like 15,000 hours where this time should be with the parents.
Yeah.
This is where a lot of the chaos gets reconciled. That chaos that you're talking about.
Yeah. And
They work.
extended relatives that are morally aligned, or friends, and I do think that the future does involve community that we can go and share experiences with, and know that we have another, like I have a friend who can keep an eye on my child, so I can get a break for a minute. And those type of networks are so important. It doesn't take the responsibility away from the primary parent to know what's going on, and to talk with their children about things that contradict, or are immoral. But I do think we need each other. And as a single parent for a long time, it's overwhelming and exhausting, and it's impossible in today's world to do a good job without help. I'll just add that.
Sarah, didn't you have something you wanted to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to, and everybody brought up a bunch of good things that I just wanted to kind of tie together there. That, first, I think that you've got it is important to have a mother and father structure, or some sort of mother and father role structure as stewards for child. And that this is very important because it helps to create a backbone, or a sort of foundation. Yeah. I always want to refer to the backbone of the structure, because it's like what holds everything up together. But then there's something to say as well about the family community. And the family community is another part of that structure. And I think there's this kind of division that goes on, where people are forgetting that their communities are also their family. And part of it is a family community. And especially the smaller the town gets, the more, intertwined it gets with each other, and everybody knows everybody. And, I kind of grew up in and out of a small town where it was like that. And it was, it was a small town where everybody knew everybody, or of everybody, and had heard of everybody, and everybody knew whose kid was who. And if a kid was wandering around when they weren't supposed to, the neighbor, even if you've never even talked to that neighbor specifically, would pick you up and take you home and be like, your kid's wandering around in the middle of the night, it's a school night, it's like stuff like that. And so there's something to say about the family community as well. And I think that's what also plays, people kind of think of it takes a village to raise a child, and it's kind of developed in the modern sense in that kind of way. But yeah, so I just wanted, and then I also wanted to point out that in regards to family entirely, is that family doesn't have to be like a blood connection. And your family is whoever it is you naturally built around you.
Familiar
And
family.
yes,
Familia.
and it's like there is this denial thing that goes on in society, where it's like, no, family is like, everything that we're connected through a bloodline. And they think, some people, they're in denial that the fact that doesn't have to be the case. So anybody who's outside of that bloodline, they won't consider to be their family. But I mean, family is just really whatever community, whether it's your immediate community within your household, or the community in your external community, like your town or whatever. It's what is built around you, and the people that end up gravitating towards you. And myself, having a family that's very fractured in many ways, my family, very few of them are actually blood related to me. My family consists of a variety of people, and they're scattered across the United States. Some of them don't even live in this country. but they're that close to me. They would be people who I would put in my clan. So I would just say that as far as being frustrated with actual relatives who are very difficult to communicate with, sometimes they're not really part of your family in that sense. It's like the difference between having a dad and a father. It's like, yeah, anybody can be a biological father. Not everybody has it in them to be a dad, which can be a completely different relationship. So,
Right.
which I understand as well.
And
So I just wanted to say that.
no, I really feel that, Sarah, because I grew up in neighborhoods where a lot of the people around me had big families. Um, Poor neighborhoods, you see a lot of that, people from other countries, basically, and they have to work together to survive, you know. But for me, being in my little, you know, 4-person family, I was lucky to have a mother and a father, but um, you see how other families can be when they have that extra layer of support, which can also be extra layers of pressure and extra layers of problems when it comes to this problem we're talking about of denial, and you can feel very alone in a family, and so I've always created my own family everywhere I go and people I meet, and I feel like a lot of you guys are part of my greater family, people that are willing to talk about these things. That's a big connection to me. It's very important. But I kind of wanted to circle back somewhat to talking about our thought process and our perception of reality. I wanted to point out Kris Nelson had another really cool slide that I'd like to bring up. Kris, can I circle back to you? Do you have anything you want to talk about right now?
I'll just do a 1 minute quick shot at like what everyone's been saying, just some points. Um, what brought to mind with the Hillary and the society and everything raising children. I remember a video, if my memory is not distorted, where I'm pretty sure it was her. She said, the children don't belong to the parents, they belong to society. So I just wanted to mention that. That was like totally twisted and like part of the collectivism mindset of getting your children, passing off the responsibility and getting your children raised by others, such as the state. And that's like the whole thing with society is everyone, and then that's where the state takes the position of everyone in the society. Well, you just give them to your government and they'll take care of it for you. And that ties into what Will was saying and Fred, and what Passio teaches, the denial of responsibility, that people, not just with parenting, but they want to pass off the responsibility to others because they're selfish, like mini-me Satanism. It's all about them, and they don't want to sacrifice their time and take on the responsibility of things like seeking out truth or raising their children properly. So they just oftentimes it's easier to just give them to the government, right? Because they're so busy with the grind and the survival. So it's an easy avenue to do it because life is difficult in our current way of doing things. So yeah, just give them off to send them away for 9 to 5 while you go to work and someone else does the job for you. Makes life a lot easier. So that responsibility and sacrifice, well, people don't want to do that because it's a lot harder to do. And what James was talking about with the quote from Gatto, um, Richard Grove has a saying of extended adolescence or childhood, which is what the education system does. It keeps you trained into remaining a child. And what I was thinking is as a cog in a machine, or as what I term a universal constructor, to be placed in the position in the machine. So we're all constructed into certain pre-selected pathways to be formed by certain career paths in order to be placed in society. And they keep us just trained enough to do tasks to make things that the elites don't make themselves. They keep us dumbed down and manipulated, and so that we don't know about the deception and the con game being played on us. So that's what I had to say about what everyone was talking about.
Great
Awesome.
points.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good summary. Yeah. Thanks, Kris.
Yeah, and I think you guys can see right now this slide that Kris put together on the perception of reality. And I think, the trivium is another good example. A lot of children don't have the opportunity to learn how to go through a thinking process such as this, to here Kris does these really neat charts with like flow chart, but I've often found in my own self, like when I was much younger, it's very difficult to just start a thought in your own head. Let's say you're on a driving trip, and to stay on that thought and to follow it where it leads, and to go down avenues of disagreement, argument in your own mind, and then circle back to the same point and actually get somewhere. And it's kind of like exercise. It takes work to go through that process. So I think the way, Kris, that what you've done with some of your slides that you've been showing for a long time on Facebook, I've been seeing, are just amazing. And it's a good example of here's a way to think, you know? So yeah, thanks for that.
You're welcome. Glad to provide some content that people can value and gain knowledge from, and help their understanding of reality. That's been a lot of my work, has been seeking to try to get people to understand more, know thyself, and how the process works internally when you go through information, and how thinking happens. And, yeah.
Right. So anybody else had any thoughts that they wanted to bring up?
If I may, I wanted to bring something something that I brought up recently is free will is what are what is gonna be a reaction. How do you choose to react to the stimuli of the external world? What are you doing with the information that is provided to you? Some are bad, some are good, some are neutral, depend. But the only thing we can really do in this world is how do you react to the things happening? Are you in control of this? And if you're not in control, let it go because it's going to destroy you. I know what I'm talking about. What I mean is acceptance, reconciliation. And reconciliation, I'm talking about reconciliation with yourself and reconciliation with the external world, the people that you are sharing the reality with. We are not alone. Never. We have the power to choose what to do with what is offered to us. And if I'm wrong, I suggest that someone correct me on this. But when I realized that I was in denial, when I realized that I was in the cognitive dissonance, I had the choice to continue or not to continue. If an external stimuli is making me feel bad or it's dangerous for my life, you have the choice to continue being with it or to confront it or to go away from it. But ignorance, we all know that ignorance isn't the solution. The solution is to go through this. When I'm talking about shadow working, it's only an individual thing. When we're gonna be able to look ourselves in the mirror and then confronting ourselves, and when the people we're gonna achieve a critical mass of the people we're going to this is when we will be able to heal these schisms into society, because we are actually manufacturing mental illness. We are taking children, categorizing them because they're hyperactive or whatever the nonsense they're going to tell you. Children are children. Humans are humans. We're not perfect. Nobody is. And this is where the key is. This denial is not only denial about the self, it's denial of denial. This is a crazy, horrifying thing. Because when I started to do this, I was in denial. I was in denial about a lot of things. But I realized, and I grew up, and I learned a lot of things about myself and about the world and the external world. And really, I started to understand it when I completely understood natural law. Natural law is the key to heal this. You give people the tool, you give them back their power. And I'm not talking about money. I'm talking about self-respect, self-love, the ability to confront evil when the time comes. And it's taking responsibility for your neighbors, for your family, for the children. And this is all part of this. There's no separation there. There's no separation between the statists. There's no separation between the religionists and us and the children. We're all living in this world together. We need reconciliation. We need to grow the fuck up. This is what we need to do. And it's not going to be an easy thing because people are drugged into antidepressant, SSRIs, painkillers, and they're getting younger and younger and younger. Ritalin, this garbage they're giving to the children, it's unacceptable. But why these people or these children are taking pill? Because parents deny their responsibility to well-being of their children. They're denying their own nature. Children, I know there's parents here, children are lively, they're full of energy, they're crying, whining all the time. But we have it's not about this, it's about guiding them back. If you don't have that, if you're a parent and you don't have this self-respect, you don't have this self-love, you cannot give that to your children. It's impossible. And this is a falsehood. This is a lie. Nobody can teach your children. Nobody. They will indoctrinate them. They're going to put them into a program for sure. But essentially, we have this responsibility with people outside. It's hard. We don't want to do it because some of these people are fucking lazy ass people. But we still have to go through it. And this is the responsibility. I think everyone here, or most of them, are already doing the work. And this is how now we have to, because people, the children, and when I see children with tablets, with cell phones, I'm getting angry. Okay, because the attention span there, it's gone. It's gone. They're becoming awkward. They're neurotic. They cannot control their own emotions, and they're lashing on the other people. They're lashing on their teachers. They're lashing on their friends. I mean, there's so much work to do. So
Absolutely.
much work to do.
Fred, someone in the chat asked, what is the definition of grown? And Amanda, and I think you answered that question really well in your earlier talk when you're talking about responsibility, and not only just responsibility for yourself. You made a bigger point that includes recognizing what's going on in the community and what's happening to the other children and taking it all into context, and that word that Will used has been bouncing in my head often recently. It's about context of the situation. So that's not just black and white decision making. That's not always just pointing wrong and right. It's knowing deep down what's wrong and right on principles, but out in the open, it's talking to people, it's communicating, it's understanding what's going on. And with the children, like you're saying, like they're people, understanding what their needs are and not just forcing them into these things that have been created by other people that aren't even natural ways of learning, you know. And boys, I mean, I know as a young boy, I didn't have the ability to be boxed in a little cubicle and smashed into a desk and standing in lines. That just did damage. It didn't help me learn. But I wanted to come back to Leslie, because Leslie had sent me a slide. Did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I'll introduce it. So the
Let me
question,
bring that up. Hold on just a second.
yeah, I'll start talking though.
Oh,
So one
okay.
of the things that I think is important when we're talking about, the denial is, and we're also here to be solution based, right? And to talk. That's not it.
That's not the right one.
No,
That's not
it's a circle. It's got 6 circles. I
Oh,
sent it
yeah,
to
I
you.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. So, and don't put it up quite yet, I think. So, what we, losing my train of thought. Okay, so we have people in denial, and our goal is to help people break out of denial, right? And to be able to see reality and to take responsibility. And so in my work, I'm a clinical social worker. I do mental health therapy. And a big part of my work is working individually with people to help them to see their own defenses and the way their defenses are creating conflicts and problems in their life, and to break open up that seed of denial and help people look at themselves. And so we have to ask, though, when I'm talking with people and there's a desire to change, they really have to have a why, a very solid motivation, right, to change. They need to also be able to see the just to start seeing that there's a problem and why it's important to listen to this topic. Why is it important to have a consideration box in your mind? Why is it worthwhile to listen to us when we're like jumping up and down and saying, people, there's a problem, and so it brings to mind a kind of a tool that was developed in the therapeutic world, specifically around helping people come out of addiction, because denial is a hallmark of addiction, denial and minimization. So if you can pull that up now, this is called like a wheel of change.
Mm-mm.
That was a wheel.
I had it.
So the
There it is.
idea,
Okay.
Wheelie loud noise.
do some wheelies on. Anyways, so the wheel of change sort of recognizes that there's a what they call pre-contemplation, and this is where people don't even acknowledge there's a problem and have no intention of changing their behavior. So people are just doing what they do. They're not changing. They don't see a reason why. Why should I think about that over there that you're telling me to think about? It doesn't make sense in their limited world or in their behavior. So pre-contemplation. But then what happens is in their life, there's problems that are happening related to their denial. Problems inevitably arise, and people put on their blinders. Part of my work is to help reflect back to people that there is a problem, that there are these directly, linearly related problems and symptoms related to this behavior that they're engaging in. And generally that then at some point kicks a person over into contemplation. And that's really where we're wanting to get more people into contemplating, to be in the consideration box, to be aware that there is a problem, something exists that's not right, but there's not a commitment to action. This is the phase of just gathering information and observing. And unfortunately, the consequences often build up to become more and more painful. And people have the choice to make changes and decisions before they're in excruciating pain, or they can wait till they're in pain, and then it's sort of forced upon them in some degree. And so the contemplation ultimately leads to a decision or a recognition. and an agreement with themselves to make a change. So from there is a preparation where there's an intention to take action to address a problem. So I see a problem, I recognize the need for change, I need to make a change, I need to find out, how do I do that? A lot of people wouldn't know how, they're clueless. So you seek resources, you work with your mirror neurons, because the shadow work is a mirror work, a mirror within yourself, but the people in our lives are part of our mirror. That's where our work comes in handy. That's why we're important in putting out the great work, because we're part of the reflection that's reflecting back to people their reality, so that they can start to get out of pre-contemplation into contemplation, into preparation, and then action, which is when someone modifies their behavior. They're deciding, okay, I have to do something different, or I'm going to keep repeating the same pattern of pain. And then when those actions are in place, it's not enough just to make the first step, but there's a maintenance that's required to sustain the change, where you have a lifestyle change, new behaviors to replace old. And again, education and inspiration is so important all along the way. Now, generally, we don't stay on the straight line. It's a spiral path where often we slide sideways, or a new event comes in that scares us, and we get back into relapse or falling back into old behaviors. And this cycle happens circularly, but not in a closed loop, but ideally in a spiral where you're evolving higher up towards more truth. So I just wanted to share that as a framework that I think is helpful. And I think it also can guide us as to our role in this process of bringing people out of denial. But, people have to show up in my office for me to help them with that, right? People have to sort of be willing to make that first step.
That was awesome.
Yeah, it's like wonderful that there's so much thought going into this process of conversation that each person here has brought. And I think for someone listening, I hope it inspires and motivates. And it's kind of feeling to me like I'm feeling a transition happening, and maybe this will lead into our next roundtable discussion of, okay, it's one thing to recognize this problem of denial that we see out there and this response of it, but it's another thing to start imagining, how do we get around it and how do we educate so that future generations might have a better hope towards actual freedom and in more alignment with understanding of natural law and recognition of truth, and not feeling under coercion and not having to be directly under coercion. And that means building one another up with education, refining our rhetoric. And so I'd like to close up this roundtable for tonight. But anybody would like to do closing thoughts, we can take a few more minutes. If you got something on your mind, go ahead and pop in.
I'll just say care for truth. That's you got to get people to care for truth. Then they'll break the denial. That's it.
Fucking A.
I'll say something just quickly as my closing statement, what Leslie was presenting. Because of the solipsistic mindset that a lot of people are in, when they're presented with information and they are in a state of denial, and then information is represented to them, or they experience something, it's bravado. They double down in their denial. And this reinforces subconsciously that conditioning and that behavior, which makes them even more rigid and calcified. We can look at those type of people that are, in a sense, lost, maybe next lifetime, because they keep bravado. They keep doubling down in their denial. And we could see this a lot in people's lives. Like if you think of at the end of life, when people are at the end of their life, they have all these regrets and oh, I wish I did this, I wish I didn't work so much, all this kind of stuff. That's because their whole life, bravado. They just doubled down and denied the truth in all aspects of their lives, or certain aspects of their lives. So that's my closing statement. And this is what it takes, right? Like what Kris said, a care for truth, and people speaking, taking that action of speaking and putting that vibratory energy out there in the ether to reverberate and shake the calcification that people have on their worldview. And, hopefully it cracks, and hopefully, someone develops some self-respect and looks again. So great chat with y'all.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And I would just say, add to that, the creative aspect of that, when you put yourself out there, it's very common and easy to repeat what you've heard someone else say. And I'm all for quotes and talking about other people's work. But if you find yourself repeating other people, that's when it's time to think about, how would I say this? What does it mean when it filters through my body and being and experiences? And that's a whole nother level. And that's what I appreciate about everybody here who's taken the time to do some public speaking. And the more you do it, the more you realize that you have to refine your rhetoric, and you have to think about it for yourself and relate it to yourself, and do that inner work that Fred's talking about, and deal with your trauma that Leslie talks about, and be real, like Jerry, just straight up, this is what I'm going through, this is what troubles I'm facing, and be honest. And that's hard and it's scary, but we're encouraging everybody out there to do it, and trying to call out those who aren't. And I appreciate that. And thanks, James, Fred, Jerry, Sarah, and Kris, Leslie, Will, for coming today. I really appreciate your energy and thoughts. And
I have a closing thing.
Go ahead, James.
To say, if you don't mind. When you're shedding this denial, when you're coming to terms with truth, persistence is key. You need to keep going. You have choices. Everyone does. You can go the way of maximum pain. That's a choice. And sometimes the truth is hard to deal with. The truth in its very nature is belligerent. It's going to show you things that you may not be prepared to deal with. But if you remain persistent in your quest, and you stay true to yourself, and you realize that you're doing this for the right reasons, the reward will be fantastic. And I want to encourage everybody out there to not shy away from what is true and what we're dealing with here. I don't know how much time we have left to really get on the right path here, but today is today. Tomorrow we might have tomorrow, and tomorrow is a good day to start.
I have a little things to add to.
Go ahead, Fred.
Seed 5, by the way.
5.
23rd, 24th of September. It's free for the people. I know I have some French friends that was there. So go there. It's free. There's a bunch of people, smart people with a lot of important information. So I suggest you to get there. And if you want to see the stuff, because there's a lot of great worker there, the onegreatworknetwork.com. Don't forget to encourage the people around you. These people who are pushing the truth out.
Yeah, good.
Fantastic. Thanks for sharing that, Fred. And right following this discussion, I'm going to play my little promo video I made for Seed 5, and it's showing some scenes from Seed 4 just to get folks excited. Check out seedtruth.com to learn more about that. And he even has a mailing list now where you can get some updates if you enter your email address. So I recommend that. And I'll look forward to seeing everyone at Seed 5. And hey, this roundtable, this is not going to be the last. We might be just coming back next week with another awesome roundtable. So stay tuned. I'm so glad to see everyone here. Much love, and we'll pick it up next week.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Thank you, everybody. It's wonderful to be with you guys, and thank you everyone for listening.
Awesome.
Keep caring.
I love you all.
Have a great night, y'all.
Ultimately, it's up to you.